How's it going, Andrew?
Welcome back, man.
Another week, another episode.
Another week, another episode. And you know what? I'm stoked for this one.
Ooh, yeah?
I like the last one. I'm going to like this one. So, what's been going on?
Not much. Working, living.
We had that double EA the other day.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty good. It's always a long night when you do two of them. But
Long night when you do two. Also, it's always fun when it's really the first degree of the year, too.
oh, yeah.
So it's a good learning spot where people get in there and they go, okay, we got a degree, 2 degrees down under our belt.
Yep.
We know where to improve. We know where to polish. But, you know, it's the start of the year, start of the Masonic year, and we got a lot more degrees to come up. And we have 2 new brothers.
Yep.
And both of them I'm very excited to have joining our fraternity. It was cool.
Oh, yeah.
It was funny that during one, we had the pants almost fall down fiasco.
Yeah. It was a good degree, though. They were both good degrees.
They're good degrees. It's funny that, you know, we talk about, you know, we want ritual excellence, but then what do you do when something like pants falling down comes in? And I think I handled it pretty well.
No, you did fine.
Just don't make a big deal. Just stood up and whispered, "Are your pants falling down right now?" He's like, "Yes." And I go, "Give me a second." Tie him up, get him tight, and go, "All right, let's continue."
Right.
Make it as least disruptive as possible.
Yep. No, that was a good call to handle that. So
I thought we were going to have a costume malfunction.
But yeah, no, they were good. They're good. And, you know, it goes back to what's unintentionally became my theme this year, which is do the hard stuff so the rest of it's easier. So, you know, put the guys under fire again. And
train the fortitude.
Everybody stepped up. So that was good to see. And now when we do a single one in March, it'll be a lot easier, except for the fact that it'll be your first conferral.
Yeah, I have to have the perseverance to finish getting it down into the belt, which, you know, making good progress, taking little stepping stones, but should be ready to go.
Good. It's going to be ready to go.
Should be ready.
I have to turn around and confer an MM in April, so I need my own study time. I can't focus on doing another year.
You don't worry about the EA. Should be fine. We hope.
Should. That word should scares me.
Just saying how it is, man. Should be okay. Probably fine.
I'll make sure I have a backup ready for you just in case.
Yeah, have a backup, but probably not.
Oh boy. Well, what are we talking about today, Andrew?
So we're going down our line of we're doing episodes on the cardinal virtues. And this episode, similar to the last one we did on fortitude, which deals with a way of circumscribing the passions, dealing with adverse passions. Today, we're going to be doing temperance, which deals with our pleasurable passions.
All right.
Or desirous.
Ooh. That's probably one of the harder virtues for me, but let's hit the intro and take it away.
Let's do it.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
Temperance. A very important virtue with a less cool name than fortitude.
Yep. It just doesn't sound as fun.
You know why? It's because fortitude feels cool because you're overcoming something that you were afraid to do. Temperance seems lame because you're overcoming stuff that you want to do all the time.
Right. You're trying to control things that
you like.
Right? You're trying not to over-embellish.
So let's start with the definition. There's a couple of definitions of temperance. Basically, it's the ability to interact with pleasurable things in a way that is reasonable and for the benefit of your own excellence. Another definition is the virtue of tempering or moderating one's use of pleasurable things. So it's the opposite of fortitude, but you need fortitude to be temperate. It's the ability to understand that there's things that you enjoy, but not to enjoy them to your own detriment.
Right. And I think that's sometimes a common misconception with some of the parts of temperance when you're talking about certain different aspects of it, is that people assume that temperance means like
don't have fun.
Don't just don't do it at all. And it's not that. It's controlling you're like controlling your passions and not overindulging. It's everything in moderation, even moderation.
Everything in moderation, even moderation. A good example that I saw that I thought would be helpful is it's video I was watching was talking about how when you're a kid, you have the option between broccoli and candy. Okay. Candy you want. It's amazing, but it's unhealthy. Broccoli you don't want because it's gross, but it's good for your health. So what's one to do?
What do you do if you like broccoli? Can you overindulge on broccoli?
You can overindulge on everything, I think, technically. But so the idea is temperance is the ability of the mind to look at broccoli and candy and going, I like candy, but I can't have candy all the time. And there's a right and wrong place to have candy. And then I need to prioritize broccoli, but I can still have some candy, but I can't have more candy than broccoli, more or less. So it's the ability to say there's things that are pleasurable that you enjoy because your body is inclined to be like, this gives me the woohoo, but know that it's not, you can't prioritize just what you like. You have to prioritize what you need and in the right amounts.
Right. Well, let's start with a fun part to this. Why is temperance one of the 4 cardinal virtues, and why is it important to Masonry?
So it's important because temperance is what makes the body governable. And that's what I believe is said in the Masonic lecture as part of it, is that if you're taking things from a Masonic perspective, if you're taking things in excess, not only is it going to cause problems for you, it could also mean within that intemperance, such as, let's say, you're hammered, you might divulge the secrets of Masonry because you're not in a good state of mind, because you're overindulging too much and you're losing your ability to think clearly. That's one aspect. And it's important to the Masonic fraternity because temperance is what basically helps with, it's another internal practice of circumscribing the passions, and it helps keep you really just happy and healthy, technically speaking. And it can help you avoid a lot of trouble that you can create through intemperance.
Right, for sure. And I think there's really, really strong emphasis put on that even in the Master Mason charge, the regularity of your own behavior.
And in the Entered Apprentice charge, where it says to avoid all intemperance or irregularity, which may debase the dignity of your profession. So by being intemperate, it can not only debase the dignity of your profession, it can debase the dignity of the fraternity, and it can debase the dignity of yourself if you are not keeping things within their right place and the right amounts. So traditionally speaking, the classical philosophers thought of 3 big things where they would say this is where a lot of the intemperance comes from, and that's food, drink, and sex. Things that people like a lot and have a hard time always reining in to their proper and healthy proportions.
Right. Yeah, and it is difficult at times to moderate everything to like reasonable levels at all times. It is really difficult. You gotta let your hair down sometimes, right?
Yeah, and I think from a practical, like we're not ascetic monks and you're not trying to seek absolute perfection in temperance, but the practice of temperance is an active effort to make sure things are kept within a healthy amount.
Right.
And so temperance is actually broken down. I know in Fortitude we talked about how traditionally these virtues are broken into sub-virtues that kind of are within them. Within temperance, there is chastity, which the thing is, what's kind of come to people's mind is the extreme version, which is not necessarily what it's implying. So chastity simply means having circumspection and control over sexual impulse. Humility, meaning have circumspection over your ego and being humble. Self-regulation, Avi. Hospitality, being able to be hospitable. Decorum. Abstinence, which in this circumstance means having the moderation over your food intake. Forgiveness, which deals with moderation over your anger, probably a little bit. Another impulse. And sobriety, which we are once again, you'll think in your absolutes. It doesn't mean be sober. It means have control over your alcohol consumption.
Right.
And that all these don't mean don't do any of these. It means moderate them according to your health and what is necessary for the betterment of yourself.
I think I think the fact that humility falls within temperance is a very interesting concept. The regulation of the ego. And I would say outside of maybe the sober one, and the food one, I would say sobriety, abstinence from food, and humility are probably the biggest three that most people would have difficulty with.
Yes. And I think when you deal with, I think chastity is included in that too. Chastity, abstinence, and sobriety are dealing with, I think, some of the hardest ones because as humans, we're very triggered by food. Food is very pleasurable and delicious, but you can't only eat delicious things. You have to find a way to make them healthy and not too much. Sobriety, meaning, there's things that you can have that can help alter your mind, in various ways, but there's problems with that if you're always messed up. And chastity, meaning, there's a lot of things that can get you in trouble if you're not being reasonable with sex. And, that could be violating a variety of your obligations.
Right.
And being just, can cause trouble. All three can cause trouble for your health and your interaction with the world around you.
So I find it interesting if you look at those in a different way, abstinence, chastity, and sobriety are all linked to the physical. Humility is the only one that's really linked to the mental.
And decorum.
Decorum.
And forgiveness. I forgot to toss one in. That's purity.
Oh.
Purity is to not have a naughty mind, more or less.
Jeez.
So to try to keep that into balance, so you're not sexualizing every person you see, to try to keep it a little bit in due check.
Right.
Because that can also get you in trouble. You could
Right.
so yeah, this deals with a lot of it's kind of an awkward conversation on some of this stuff, but it's dealing with very raw human instincts.
Right.
And keeping them in check.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure. Those are all basal instincts though, right? There's something to a certain extent. I think part of the reason we have problems with food consumption is because now we have it readily available all the time.
Yep.
Whereas, historically, maybe you got to eat an absolute ton one day out of the week. So you did gorge, but now, something like that is buried in our DNA to a certain extent. But now it's always readily available. So now we overconsume fairly regularly.
Yep. And I think that's why when these philosophical ideas were coming about and becoming very popular amongst the educated peoples, that would have been in the classics. So that's finally when people are settling down in very productive towns where there's a lot more access to things. And so our human natural animalistic side is we should always be as fat as possible because we could starve. And then now it's now you have too much. So you need to actually self-regulate because the natural pressures are not going to self-regulate you for you. So your mind has to take control, where in the past, potentially nature kind of handled that for you and put a check on that.
Right. Because your food came intermittently.
Yep.
So
it's an interesting topic. And even for me, this is one of my hardest.
Yeah.
Impulse control, especially over eating and alcohol consumption. It's taken years into my, coming out of college for me, especially with alcohol consumption. You get a little bit too wily with it. And I think a lot of your adult life is taking that gavel and chipping it back down and you need to control this and have it in due bounds.
Well, and what makes sobriety an interesting one, and it could be sobriety with alcohol or any other number of substances, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it's talking about controlling it, but the very substance that you're taking in and then trying to control your consumption of lowers your inhibitions, right?
Yep.
So you get 2 cocktails in and you're like, yeah, I can have a third, because you've inhibited that part of the brain that should be the one to reminding you to exercise temperance.
Yep. And that's why, on certain substances, there's a higher emphasis put on these you got to be more careful of because it can be a snowball effect.
Right.
And it's interesting in the way that these things are super challenging, but they also are the ones that the requirements to actually making a difference, once again, comes down to prudence. And it comes down to logic and reasoning your thought, and scheduling is a good example, over just saying, ooh, a piece of candy. Ooh, a piece of candy. hey, look at another piece of candy. Ooh, a cookie. And just saying, I see cookie, I take cookie. You know what I mean? Which
Right.
is, and that's the challenge, is being able to catch yourself going, ooh, and say, detach, pause. How many cookies have you had? And you're like, 20. And you're like, stop. You're like, step back.
Do not eat the whole package of Oreos.
Yeah, like you had enough Oreos. And that's where the challenge comes when trying to apply temperance. But the benefits of temperance are huge, because when you enjoy a cookie, one cookie or two after a meal once in a while, that's a great thing to enjoy.
Right.
But when it's all the time, it can have negative effects on the byproducts of having something that's so sugary or whatever it might be. And so the key to temperance isn't complete and utter, you don't do anything that is like that. It's that everything has its time, its place, and its right amount to fit into a healthy body.
Well, right. And even if you want to look at it like the example with the cookie, right? If you eat 20 Oreos every day, eventually you're going to be like, man, these Oreos just don't taste as good as they used to. Whereas if you eat 5 Oreos once a week, let's say, they're still going to taste good for quite a while. Where if you eat 5 Oreos every other month, you're going to be like, man, I forgot how good Oreos are.
So the benefits of temperance can be that you enjoy things more too when you're not overindulging in that thing. Too much of a good thing can become a bad thing.
Yep, exactly.
So when it comes to applying methods for temperance, there's tons there. You know how I know temperance is important? There is so much information on people trying a new fad diet, trying to, do intermittent fasting, trying to do 10-step programs, there's so much in our society dealing with methods for helping with these problems, because this is a huge one for humanity in general in modern society.
It's the hardest of the virtues, right? I would say it is the hardest one to live up to some of the expectations of.
Because its benefits are really mostly self-benefits. And so
Right.
it can be hidden a lot of the time, where you're not going to get as much pressure from society to be like, do better, because you're just going to destroy yourself if you want to.
Well, and interestingly enough, as we're sitting here talking about temperance, I can't help but think about our last episode about fortitude and how it requires fortitude to do the things in the temperance list. But at the same time, if you're regulating and putting in that effort to control that stuff, you're building fortitude at the same time. So these two are almost intertwined.
Yep. And they're intertwined because they both deal with the circumscription of the passions. So the way that the virtues are broken out, this helped me actually kind of conceptualize it a little better. I took notes on it actually, is that they're broken into 3 categories. Prudence is the perfecting of the mind. Justice is the perfecting of the will. So that's the way the mind goes out into the world, dealing good accord with people.
Right.
And fortitude and temperance are the perfecting of the passions. So when you're trying to circumscribe your passions, they both are playing with each other,
Right.
to try to keep your body and mind governable and in good health.
Interesting. I like that. And, I know you had broke out forgiveness as one of them. I wonder if that's supposed to be don't hold grudges against people. If somebody wronged you.
Yep.
Less of an anger thing and more of a, don't be mad at somebody forever. Have the willingness to forgive somebody that wants to be forgiven.
It's like circumscribing your wrath, or your grudging. Yeah, it is. And that's interesting because it seems like this is very body related, but I think it is a lot of stuff that is just natural human impulse related more than anything.
Right.
You're inclined to want to feel bad at someone for wronging you. And if you do that, it's in its own accord, maybe it's necessary. But if you do it too much and too long, it becomes unhealthy more than helpful.
Right. Right. Agreed. And I think part of that line is also dependent on how far are you taking that grudge? Are you constantly badgering somebody about it or something like that? And the ultimate defining line for sure for me is, if that person wants to be forgiven, are you able to forgive them? And if you're not exercising temperance of forgiveness.
Sure. The other weird one that sticks out to me is decorum, which decorum's definition is behavior in keeping with good taste and propriety, or good etiquette. Interesting there, where it's you might have the tendency just want to always be comfortable. So maybe wear sweatpants all the time. and just do what, be unclean. Like, why should I shower? It's not that important. Who cares?
Right.
But they're saying like decorum is important because you're circumscribing your kind of your sloth or your laziness and saying, try to keep yourself at least in good taste and good order.
Right.
Which is interesting.
We're talking about like basic etiquette with decorum, right? Like
that as well.
How are you, are you eating everything off your plate with your hands, or are you, using your silverware? Are you just, stuff like that? Like, are you behaving appropriately in the setting you're in?
Yep. And then, the moderation within moderation is like, you don't always have to be perfectly prim and proper. Like you're sitting down to a fancy meal, but like try to keep your base instincts in check and try to, especially as Masons, I think decorum is something that us as Masons, people come from various walks of life. And I think Masonry sometimes encourages brothers to come to a certain level of like, at our lodge, like, hey, I know you're not traditionally a suit wearing guy, but during part of the year, we're going to wear suits. Right. But we also try to moderate our moderation and say, we'll give you a couple of days where you can be in your skin, but we should try to come to a base level where we're both at a level of decorum, which I think is very handy for some people who are like, I'm not really used to this lifestyle, and they'll never fully be necessarily like, I'm a prim and proper lad, but they can be like, but I'm comfortable in this environment and I know how to have a level of decorum when necessary and at a good time. So like if you come to a wedding and you're like, I don't own a suit, you can feel uncomfortable because everyone's like, what the heck? Why is this guy not wearing a suit at this wedding? And having a comfort level with love of decorum is to your own benefit, because when you're put in a situation that requires it and you're comfortable with it, you can be like, I'm happier in this space knowing how to interact in that space.
Right. Well, I mean, even like within the stated meeting, there's both written and unwritten rules of decorum and etiquette that, all of us agree to follow.
And it maintains harmony too.
Yep.
So I think we got a good grasp of what temperance is and the ways it can interact. How do we be more temperate, or how do we strengthen our temperance?
For me personally, I think it's just a matter of me like actually paying attention to what I'm doing.
Prudence and mindfulness.
Yep. We're going to go back to that. But yeah, it's paying attention and being like, have I been letting it fly a little too loosey-goosey lately? Like, am I really minding the things that I need to pay attention to? Or am I just kind of going, well, whatever, it's no big deal. Yeah, I had 5 cocktails the other night instead of the 2 I was going to have. Like, and then it's reining it back and going, no, I've been not paying attention to it enough. And bringing that like mindfulness back to be like, I'm just going to have to.
And so for me, so I was thinking about this, I was reading lots of methods, and I was thinking about what I have done, because the thing is, since I'm ADHD, one side effect of that is impulse control, which falls right into temperance problems. And the way that you're taught as someone who is ADHD without medication, to try to self-treat it has to do a lot with planning and with setting rigid rules that you can kind of use, and time management. So, and that's where I've found the most success, even though it can be intermittent, where like, like you said, have I been laying my hair down for too long? Oh, I need to get this back in control. A lot of the advice that I had received, and I see when looking up what people do for temperance, is setting some sort of goal. So it means self-analyzing and going, where am I having problems? Like contemplate and go, where am I slipping, more or less? And go, for me, it's like I'm eating too much, or, you're overindulging in alcohol or anything like that. And you go, okay, what is something achievable that I can do? Good example, what I use is I sometimes will eat too much during lunch. So what I'll do is in the morning when I'm planning on I do time management for work, I'll write what I'm going to have for lunch, because when I'm not hungry, I'm making better decisions. Like, right, I'm going to have 1 sandwich. You're like, okay. So then when that time comes up, is reminding yourself, like, now you're going to have sandwich, chips, something else, and you want to throw a bunch in and go, no, your prudent mind has set this task ahead of you, knowing that your impulse mind later will be making a less good decision. And so I've found it's really helpful you can do meal planning. That can be helpful to say, this is what I'm going to eat today. Right. Before you're in that mood. It's like going to the store when you're hungry. It's never a good time when you go to the store when you're hungry.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah. Don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry.
And so that can be a very helpful and achievable way to make small advances. And sure, you're going to slip here and there, but it's nice to set a standard with yourself when your mind is more in an eased and relaxed, not impulsive state. Simple solutions can be like, okay, you know where I can make a small gain? I've been having way too much soda. I'm going to switch this for something else and try to say, you set like a rule. I can have soda with dinner and that's it. And you set it in a way that you think is a more proper way to still enjoy what you enjoy, but in due bounds. Another way that I've tried in my life that has helped me, in especially when it comes to alcohol, is I try not to drink at home, only when I'm at social events, which isn't that the thing is all these rules are not, this is the way to do it, everybody. This is something you have to contemplate yourself with how you feel, because everyone's due bounds is different for what they need to be happy and healthy. So for me, that was a good thing. But for you, it might be like, I'm only going to have one cocktail a day after work to unwind, but I'm not going to have 7. So It's really contextual based on the person. So for me, I only drink usually when it's at a social event is what I try. And obviously, no one's perfect, so that'll vary, but it's good to set some basic ways to kind of attempt to rein things in. The other thing I do is I do fasting, which helps you learn to deal with hunger.
Yep.
And that can be a really nice one for dealing with learning to be comfortable, which is like fortitude. Practicing hunger helps you also be a little less manipulated by the impulse of hunger and gives a little more restraint, I've found too.
Right. I've found when it comes to like food, just thinking of food as fuel rather than like enjoyment is also helpful. Just changing your mindset on how you think about it. But I feel like the physical ones, a lot of people have talked about, and a lot of people know, like there's a lot of advice out there on how to deal with that one. The one I find the most interesting is the humility one, because dealing with your own ego is extraordinarily difficult for a lot of people. It's
life's work.
yeah, for sure. But like, what methods? Like, I should say, I kind of know what methods I make sure to do to keep my ego in check. Like, I always give the team credit for stuff. Like, I don't
take credit personally. Yep. That's a good one.
That's a good way to keep it in check, because if you have a team of people working on things, it's everybody accomplished it, even though you might be in the position where you're the one that gets the credit at the end of the day. You need to make sure you're passing that credit off to the people that actually helped you make it happen.
And a humble action isn't like, okay, in a team, some people are going to do more and less work. The humble man says, like you said, the team did a great job. They don't single people out like they did the most, they did the least. They can do that one-on-one with the person and give people their correct props. But it's a good lesson in humility. I always do this thing where I try to actively not seek credit. So if someone doesn't give me credit, I'll see like, and I'll just go, who cares? You're doing this because that's a service and you don't need to do this for the credit. So I actively try to remember to be like, why do I need the credit so much? It's like, because my ego wants to eat it. And you're like, no, don't feed I want to eat that. I want to eat that credit. And you're like, okay, calm down.
Right.
And just like, let it be. And say like, I was talking in the last episode about how remembering that you're training in a virtue can be a good motivator. Be like, I'm going to practice humility this week. So when I do stuff, I don't get credit. Every time I don't take credit and I don't feel upset, I'm going to say, good, I did an arm rep of humility. I feel like I'm getting a little humbler.
Right.
And it's constantly, you can also phrase things like, you don't have to pump up your accomplishments and constantly shove them down people's throats. There's a way that you can share information without tooting your own horn, for example.
Right.
So like when I'm doing posts about the lodge and our all the good things we're doing, I always try to put it in an informative manner instead of a look at me, look at how good we are. We're the biggest, we're the best lodge. You ain't never seen nothing like it, because it sounds rude. And I found that it's easier and I enjoy it more just being like, hey, we had a great day tonight. This is what happened. Right. It was awesome.
Right. We did this cool thing. Boom. Done.
Because, I think that humility, you want to, one is perceived better, because the only people who benefit from that kind of boastful lack of humility is people within that who are like, yeah, feed my ego. I am the best. But people on the outside are like, Jesus Christ, calm down, man.
Right.
And so it's important to find that way to maintain a level of decorum and humility, because it also helps us as brothers maintain harmony between one another too.
Right. For sure. And I feel like you touched on a very interesting point there between feeding your own ego through doing that and kind of like lighthearted trash talking. Because lighthearted trash talking is a little bit of feeding the ego, but you're kind of doing it to like barb somebody a little bit, and guys tend to trash talk each other, right?
Yep.
That tends to be something we do, but there's a line
Of due bounds
that can be crossed where it turns from lighthearted trash talking to boasting and feeding your ego.
or just to legitimate trash talking.
Right. Or legitimate trash talking. Yeah.
We've all had that buddy before where, guys like to trash talk, but then you maybe take it too far and the guy's like, can you lay off my stuff? And you're like, oh, it went from being lighthearted and fun to crossing a line. And the humility is knowing to do. There's a great quote that I wrote down. The use of pleasurable things at the right times, context, and in the right way for the right reasons. And I like that one because it's kind of like there's a time and a place for trash talking and joking, and there's a time and place for not. And the temperance is knowing when's the right time to bust your buddies,
Yep.
and then the right time to, give them their due respect. It's like, if you're friends with the master of the lodge and then you bust him up when you're outside lodge, but then in the meeting you just say something like super rude. He's like, dude, I'm not happy with the timing of this, and now I'm mad. Like,
right.
You're undermining my authority at this point. Like,
Right.
So context is key.
Well, and even the master can be guilty of that sometimes, being friends with people in his officer line and then stepping over a line a little bit, trash talking from the east, when he meant it in nothing but a good way.
So, yeah. And so like, I think humility is like a really important Masonic trait. And I know that, our egos are always problem in Masonry, and they're a problem in any organization. And the best way to be of the best service to the craft is to be humble, because a lot of the problems that you'll see around the world in various Masonic organizations, they all stem from ego. You can see it all over the place. And you go, the focus on humility is to your benefit and to the benefit of the lodge as well.
Right. And I think there's two great examples of where you can definitely see, especially Masonic egos get out of control. And one is on social media, that egos tend to get in the way on social media.
Social media always inflames the ego, I've noticed.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And especially, when you start getting really, really, really high in like follower accounts and stuff like that, if you're not paying attention to humility, your ego will get the best of you in a heartbeat. And then
it sneaks up on you.
And then disharmony shows up. What a surprise. Egos get involved and disharmony ensues. The other place I think you see it in Masonry is, if you could call them this, I guess, highly decorated Masons who have put a lifetime of service and everything else into the fraternity. And then their humility went by the wayside with their 15th award at some point or whatever.
Yep.
And, now it's just purely ego driven and listen to me because this is what I've done type of deal.
Well, and the big ego trap in Masonry is we receive so many titles and medals and accolades and all that stuff where you'll find the best Masons are like, a lot of the Grand Masters that I've met are actually very humble. And you'll be like, what's up? Most worshipful, be like, is brother. Just call me brother. Like, where they're able to see that title has a place. There's a time, a context, and a place for that title.
Right.
And there's a time and a context of a place for the humility. And knowing, like, I'm not presiding over the Grand Lodge. Relax. I'm just here as a brother. Chill.
Right.
And I think that that's a good lesson that I've learned from a lot of those Grand Masters that I've met, is to keep that, because it's too easy to fall into that trap.
Right. And you'll see a lot of them even physically displaying that aspect of humility by the fact that they don't wear their like past Grand Master garb unless it's like a formal event where, the decorum and etiquette of the situation would require that they wear it. If they're just showing up at a stated meeting, a lot of times they just put on a white visitor apron, which is humility in practice right there.
Well, and that's the whole thing with the temperance, is knowing when it's the right time and right place and the right way to use your, if you're a decorated person, there's a right time, a right place where that is appropriate. And there's a right time and right place where maybe it's not. And it takes the it takes prudence and justice, actually, in harmony with the knowledge of trying to be temperate, to know when the right place and right time is to apply that level of authority. And that is the key to being temperate in that regard. You know, it's funny when you're thinking, you know how in the last episode we talked about screen time, bringing up social media. That's another one that if in the ancient times they had screens, this would be on that list. They'd be like screen time.
100%. In fact,
chastity, humility, self-regulation, screen time.
I think Time for Fellowship just added screen time to the list of temperance values. And we're going to take credit for that. Thank you very much. Feed him the ego a little bit there.
You're welcome, St. Aquinas, and you're welcome, Aristotle. We're adding screen time.
We're adding screen time. We're going to bring your value of temperance into the 21st century. But no, for sure, I feel like, you know, and social media, for all the benefits it has I feel like it's very important that you practice temperance when it comes to screen time and stuff like that with it.
It's addictive. It's addictive just like any other of these problems.
Not only is it addictive, it can be an extremely toxic environment.
Yep.
Like, there's good parts of social media and there is terrible parts of social media. And you got to be careful with it. If you dive into that world for too long every day, it takes a toll on your mental health.
Which would be included in the pleasurable things in a way that is reasonable and leads to your excellence and happiness.
Right.
And that can 100% pull on that. And I think screen time is huge. And the way you interact and the way if you don't circumscribe your passions on social media, how it can actually it's horrible. People have killed themselves over social media.
Right.
Like, it can be that detrimental if not respected and tamed and tempered.
Well, and it can become, if you want to look at it from the perspective of, like you mentioned, it's addictive, it can impact like your family relationships and everything else if you start letting it be an addiction just as much as being an alcoholic could, because you're just sitting there on your phone, your computer,
you're distant,
you're disconnected from everything, you're letting dishes pile up in the sink, you're, you know, doing whatever because you have this addiction you're dealing with. You know, it's very similar to any other addiction, honestly. And
what's nice, if you're looking for active methods for limiting screen time, one example that I use is I try not to be on my phone at work, because that'll draw me away from my productivity. So I'll actively there's a lot of these phones now have things even in their core apps to lock your phone for, like, I'm going to lock this from the hours of 3 to 5 or whatever. And then you can select what you would like to be able to receive. And I'll be like, I can still receive text messages and calls. So if someone from work is reaching out, fine, but I can block social media outlets. You could do similar things like, hey, from the hours of dinner till like 2 hours after, I'm going to block this so that I'm present during dinner and this time. And so the thing is, it's not saying don't look at your screen, just saying moderate. And if you're having a hard time with that process, there are apps and stuff available to assist you and give you, forced moderation.
Right. And I utilize some of those as well to like the focuses that you can set on an Apple phone. I use some of those to like make certain apps unavailable to me while I'm at work, or, you know, when I'm someplace where I don't want to know if I got an email, because I'm just not checking my emails at that moment because I'm going to be present in what I'm doing at the time, you know. So I think it's important to use those tools to help exercise temperance over social media.
And the thing is, there's also lots of apps. We live in a nice era, too, where when it comes to temperance, people have been so concerned with it. There's various apps that you can try to help track your calories, track your food counts. And I mean, this is beating a dead horse, because living in modern times, we've seen this stuff because, you know, Weight Watchers, carnivore diet, paleo, blah, blah, blah. Like, everyone is kind of concerned about this. And you can tell because we're all trying to find a way. And, you know, we said, like you said at the start, everything in moderation, including moderation, which that means it's important for us as Masons to try to find these issues that we may have and to address them, but also to give yourself grace and understand we're not going to be perfect, and it's going to be a life's journey to work on temperance. And you'll never be able to be fully temperate because it's almost impossible to always control these impulses. But your job as a Mason is, if you want to improve yourself and become a better man, this is a good avenue to see healthy benefits from that practice.
Right. Well, it boils down to there's temperance and there's excess. And too much excess is a bad thing, just like too much temperance is a bad thing. There's a middle ground. There's a middle road to walk where you can let yourself indulge every now and then and enjoy it, but be careful not to completely like, whoop, pull the cord and be like, I just can't do anything fun ever.
Yep.
Like, because that
You'll end up
eventually
failing.
You're going to go off the rails eventually. So,
Well, and the symbol, I forgot to explain the symbol. The symbol of temperance is generally viewed as it's usually a woman, once again, representing the internal, and she's usually pouring water between vases a lot of the time and various stuff. So she's balancing the flow. I mean, water is representing drink for sure. And there's usually a food element where it's trying to find always the middle path.
Yeah.
And so even when it comes to temperance, you're looking for the middle way. So between the extremes, you're always trying to say, where's the more like middle, like, so even when it comes to risk management, you're like, I can do this option or this option. Like, what's the middleest of these two extremes? And so that is another way to view temperance is like, okay, I want to enjoy this thing, but I need to take a more middling path between overindulgence and underindulgence, because you can also eat too much, but there's also the other side of temperance is eating too little and starving, and that can be eating disorders and things like that.
Right.
That's the opposite end.
Well, and I think, because we should probably get this wrapped up here soon, I think an interesting topic to delve into maybe on a future episode would be temperance in regards to Masonic commitments.
The power of no.
The power of no. I think that would be a fun thing to talk about, because
I already put it on the list.
sometimes we overextend ourselves and say yes and agree to be doing too much. And I think we need to remember to temper ourselves within the fraternity.
Cause of Masonic burnout.
Yep.
So what's your last takeaway before we go to news and events? Temperance.
It's hard. It's going to be the hardest one you deal with. But if you do what we talked about in the fortitude episode, and you move a small pebble at a time, and you develop better fortitude and better temperance for small things, eventually you can work up to bigger things. And probably the biggest one on that list to tackle is the ego.
My last takeaway is we're here to be good men and become better men. And we can't be better men if we're unhealthy, because our bodies are falling apart. Like my body feels like it has been lately because I'm getting old. So when you're looking at situations, always try to find the middle path. When you look at something, always try to take less than your original impulse. You look at a pizza and you go, I'm going to have 3 slices, have 2. Take a little less. I'm going to stay out and have, a couple of drinks. Someone says, hey, you guys want to do a round of shots? So, I'm about to leave. I'm going to take one less. And so just actively remember that it's to your benefit to identify these things, and it sucks, and it's the worst one, like Matt said, but ultimately it can be one of the most enjoyable things for your health. So keep temperance in mind, do your best. We're all fighting on the same battle. We're all working on our ashlers.
And just remember, it's okay, and it's not bad every now and then to let your hair down a little bit. Discipline, like Andrew said, but every now and then, it's not going to hurt to let your hair down.
Have some fun. Have fun being temperate. Cool. Let's move on to news and events.
All right, sounds good.
All right, time for some news and events. Got a news story for you guys from here, right out of Wisconsin, from our brothers in Brookfield. So our Brookfield brethren actually were able to invest in their community by donating $1,000 to the Family Promise of West Bend, which what that does is it provides children and their families with shelter, basic needs, and assistance as they seek permanent housing, which is awesome. So Family Promise is unique as it does not split up families during their crisis. So for some reason, they are in a situation where, what's it called when they family services or whatever comes knocking at your door.
Yeah.
Instead of taking the children away from the parent, they keep them together and help them transition into a new hopefully stable lifestyle.
Awesome.
And this is an awesome cause, and great job to the Brookfield brethren.
Heck yeah. Nice job, guys. All right, let's move on to events. All right, so coming up on March 9th, 2 days after the release of this episode, Silas Shepherd is meeting in Watoma. 9 o'clock, coffee and carbs, 10 o'clock open, I think. Don't quote me on that.
We should have just looked this up.
Just look on OLP for the times on that one, and didn't put it in my notes. That's my fault. On March 9th as well, the Tom Torville Interstate Lodge's Table Lodge is going on. 4 p.m. social, 5 p.m. meal. I'm going to guess you already had an RSVP prior to this, so have fun if you're going to that. On March 23rd, the Valley of La Crosse Scottish Rite Reunion is going on at the La Crosse Masonic Center from 9 to 4. Also on March 23rd is the District 1 District Meeting, 10 a.m. at the Iron River Masonic Center, followed by a Masonic bowling tournament at 1 p.m., which is open to the public. Please make your reservations with Brother Pat Norden. On March 28th, Valley of Madison Scottish Rite Feast of the Paschal Lamb. And
so into April, we have a very unique event coming out of the Scottish Rite Valley of Madison, which is a event called Native Spirit. We $35 a ticket, and this is a really great opportunity if you're interested in an indigenous culture, as well as any sort of they're going to be doing the native dance along with storytelling and music. So it's a really cool cultural event to check out to support the indigenous community. That's going to be going from the 5th through the 7th, $35 a ticket. It's open a couple of these days, usually around, it looks like it's in the afternoon or evening. You can find out more information on that on their social medias or in the mailer. On the 13th of April, District 5 is doing their spring meeting. It's going to be at 7:30 a.m., pancakes and coffee, yum. And then from 9 to 11 a.m., they'll have the actual meeting at the Sparta Masonic Center. On the 13th, we're having the Masonic Acts of Kindness Gala fundraiser right here. It's going to be a great event. There's going to be raffles, comedians, along with a variety of other fun things, and a meal, I should say, to support the Acts of Kindness. On the 18th of April, we're actually having a soup and chili fest here at Lake Lodge 189. This is going to be from 5:30 to 7 p.m., and this is a really fun one. It's actually my idea. It was one of the first things I came up with as a new Master Mason to try out.
There's that ego.
And my ego coming in. I thought it encouraged people. So at the time, I was thinking, man, we got a lot of good cooks in this lodge, and I love soup. So I was like, what if I donate soup, and we can do soup flights? So we're going to have a bunch of soup and bread, and it's delicious, and you can have it here or to go. So it's a great event to come by, even if you just want to grab some soup to take home.
Yep.
Silas Shepherd on the 20th is doing, along with James Hayes Lodge, is having a presentation of a play called In Defense of the Ruffians. Very interesting education opportunity. Very cool. It's going to be carbs and coffee at 9 a.m., gavels at 10 a.m., and that's going to be at Northwest Masonic Center. On the 24th, the Valley of Madison Scottish Rite is doing their reunion, 4th, 14th, and 16th degrees. On the 27th, that reunion continues in the Valley of Madison with the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 32nd degrees. So if you're Scottish writing it up, check them out. On the 29th of April, we have the District 12 Spring Meeting. More information to follow. Also on the 29th, that evening, Ozaki Lodge is doing their Table Lodge and Fish Boil. If you never heard of Fish Boil, it's awesome. Highly recommend it. It's going to be from 5:30 p.m. is when people are going to gather, and it's going to officially open at 6 p.m. It's going to be $25 per person. All Masons are welcome. Entered Apprentice, Fellowcraft, or Master Masons, all welcome. Reservations for that are due by April 25th with Worcester Master Schroeder. Finally, on April 30th, we have another awesome education symposium coming out of the Education Committee of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin. It's going to be at 7 p.m., and the topic is going to be the Morgan Affair. It's a really fun panel that you can learn and ask questions, and it's going to be a great time. That's events.
All right. Excellent. Well, everybody have a good day, and you'll hear from us next week.
Sounds good. See you later.